What's going on, everyone? You're listening to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and on today's episode, we sit down with Morgan DeBaun. Morgan is the founder and CEO of Blavity, Inc., home to the largest network of platforms and lifestyle brands serving the multifaceted lives of Black millennials. Their mission is to economically and creatively support Black millennials across the African scape so they can pursue the work they love and change the world in the process. During our conversation, we talked about everything from Morgan's upbringing, growing up in St. Louis, her early career and what her mindset was like, the series of events that inspired her to launch Blavity, the mission for the company and what she hopes to accomplish, what she's most excited about for the future, and much more. We'll kick things off by hearing about what young Morgan was like.
Well, young Morgan was a young Black girl in St. Louis. I am very Midwestern, very traditional St. Louis background. So I went to a private all girls Catholic school. Did live in the county, but went to school in the city. For middle school, I switched schools quite a bit. And I was definitely an entrepreneur and a hustler. I don't think that I really considered the label entrepreneur or business person. That wasn't part of my vocabulary, but I started investing in the stock market when I was about 13 years old. Constantly trying to beat my dad in the returns on who could have the best stock portfolio. I sold candy to kids in my middle school when they shut down the vending machines. So I've always been someone who's been interested in value creation and money and business at large. Definitely a multitasker. I oftentimes like starting things and then getting really good at them. And then I'm like, oh, I'm done with it now. So I took glass blowing classes. I did taekwondo, of course, sports and all that good stuff. So yeah, she was very busy.
What glass blowing that you took, was it with Jim McKelvey at third?
No, so Jim McKelvey, no, but I mean, there was 5 people in tech in St. Louis, but that was around the same time. I mean, it was around the same time that that people started to get jobs at Square. I remember that kind of cohort of white boys, frankly, at the school at WashU, and I was like, what are they doing? What's going on over there?
Being in tech, but also in glass blowing was probably just 1 or 2 people in St. Louis.
Yes, exactly. The glass blowing. Wait, do you know people in St. Louis?
Well, that's what I was saying. So Jim McKelvey is also a really good glass blower. We had him on the show, and he has his studio in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's right by WashU's campus. I did take that class, but I didn't. I haven't met him, but it was right. Jim McKelvey. Not only does he have the studio, but of course, from a tech point of view, he's incredible. Right. One of the very few people in St. Louis, him and Jack Dorsey, that made it out.
Morgan, you mentioned that you were just a young hustler and you just love making money. Where did that come from? Is that something you grew up around, or is it the fact that maybe you didn't have money and you wanted to make money? I mean, what were you inspired by?
I was inspired by a few different people and things. My dad is a doctor. He's a research doc. So he was always writing grants and on calls with people around the world, working on proposals to the NIH. And so, winning $1 million grant or multi-year investment from different funders wasn't abnormal to the kind of vocabulary and words that I was hearing growing up, listening to his conference calls because he drove me to school. And so I think creating something, being an innovator from a cultural point of view was a part of my day-to-day life. I just didn't want to do it in the educational world. I was more interested in, the corporate world and money in my pocket. And I do think that stemmed from the fact that I went to, although my family was relatively middle class, upper middle class, I was in schools where people didn't have a lot of money and there was a lot of socioeconomic diversity around me. And so, Catholic school district, I have girls who went to my school who had 7, 10 brothers and sisters. And, it was very apparent their lives and the different challenges that they had versus my household. So yeah, I do think that I saw the power of cash and money at a young age.
Did you, and you mentioned, kind of jumping around from school to school, especially like around middle school. Did that make it hard for you to like keep friends at a young age? And like, did you feel more like on your own,
Mm.
versus kind of, being in like this clique or like this like group that, you kind of grew up with from a young age up until going off to college?
It definitely made me a bit of a loner, which I think I am today, and probably a bit of an introvert. Um, but I know how to make friends fast. So it also allowed me to learn how to code switch between different subcultures and cultures. To your point, definitely in St. Louis, people go to the same school from grade school all the way through high school. So, if you're not friends with those girls when you're 10, they're definitely not going to make you friends when you're 14, 15, first year freshman. So I did have to learn how to navigate those spaces, and it made me a stronger leader, I think, today, because I can relate to so many different types of people very quickly.
Right, because at the time, because that was kind of the same with me, like just jumping around from school to school, you have to like make new friends.
Yeah.
But it does help you think much more independently, in my opinion, from a young age, because like you said, it's easy to get stuck in that bubble that is very common. I mean, it's, I'm in St. Louis, but also like, in certain areas, like we're from LA, but certain pockets of LA,
Right.
like you have your different school systems. Everyone's just like thinks the same way and like likes the same things and does the same things and probably ends up on the same path or similar path in life,
That's right.
if they're just kind of conforming, then as opposed to like being independent. So I definitely think there's a lot of pros there. But so I guess you mentioned so in college you studied, I think I saw, political science and entrepreneurship. Did you want to always like just start your own business and have your own business and not work for anybody? And did you have that mindset, or what did you kind of envision life would look like after college?
Yeah, I didn't think about much of life after college until I was probably a junior, senior. So I got into school at WashU, which is right down the street from my high school, frankly. So I was in a universe that was surrounded by comfort, because Washington University is very much not St. Louis. Like, it's completely different. Less than 6% of the population there probably has stepped foot outside of a perimeter of the campus. And so I was really focused on being present there. So I was student body president, at the age of 21, very young, freshman class president, within months of being on campus. So I was focused on hanging out and being in the student groups and really enjoying my college experience. I think at some point, though, one of the good things about student government, the reason why I did it, especially at a school like WashU, is you have an incredible budget. So the budget was like over $1 million, and you actually had to like allocate the budget, and people would lobby you, and they would come in and pitch in the Senate, and we would vote, and they'd pitch in the Treasury, and we would vote, and it's this whole thing. So again, I don't think that I thought, oh my gosh, one day I want to be an entrepreneur. It was more of like, I like being in places and spaces where I can make things and make decisions and work with groups of people and help them bring their ideas to life. Student government was one way of doing that. Sophomore year, junior year, I started taking entrepreneurship classes in the business school, and then through that started to build products and companies. So I had a product in WashU called Quad Connect with 3 other guys, and one of which is now my co-founder of Blavity. And we, won the student pitch competition and did all that dance. And so I started to test kind of the formal definition of entrepreneurship, I would say, later in my college years.
Talk to us about what Quad Connect was.
Oh, you're making my heart smile asking me about Quad Connect. So Quad Connect was a community platform for students to find out what was happening around them and where the free food was. So the main point was we have a bunch of free food that every student group does. That's like kind of the way that their customer acquisition was. We've got free pizza, we've got free Thai food, we've got free whatever. But if you're not in that social group, and you're not in that Facebook group, which was at the time like just starting to happen as Facebook groups, then how would you know? How would you know? So because I was student body president, I could see all the line items of how much money we were freaking spending on food for student groups. And I was like, there's no way we're eating all this. So information asymmetry technology is a great way to solve that.
So Morgan, I'm curious. So you talk about Quad Connect, it's connecting people to this free food. So what was your idea of making money at the time? Like with Quad Connect, how do you monetize free food?
Now, I'm not sure we had thought about it that far. I think that at the time, the general philosophy of startup life was like you monetize it later, you just get a bunch of users. So I don't think we ever really thought about money. Maybe it was like advertising in local restaurants or something around St. Louis, but no, we weren't that involved. Obviously, it failed miserably, but yes.
Hey, no, you got to learn some business lessons somehow. So after you graduated, what was the plan? I mean, did you think that you were going to go off and start your own company? Did you want to work for somebody else? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I got the startup bug, I would say, with Quad Connect, and I then started to look for startups to go work for in St. Louis and get internships. Like I said before,
Right.
there's like 4 in the entire city at the time. There was this guy who had an ed tech startup. It was walking distance to campus, so I worked there. And I was basically like a data sourcer, content sourcer. It was an ed tech platform where you could, based off of the curriculum or the textbook that you had for high schoolers, you could look up your lesson plan on our platform and it would match you with YouTube videos that would teach that lesson. Great platform. Makes sense. It was also my first exposure to like how curating content and putting it in context can help advance or inform people better. He became a mentor of mine. And so as I was deciding what to do after college, I started applying to different jobs. And he said, you can go to Singapore. That's going to be the fastest place to get wealth and one of the fastest growing tech economies. And I said, look, Joe, I'm a Black girl from St. Louis. I'm not going to Singapore. Okay. What's number 2 on the list? He said, Silicon Valley still has a lot of growth. You could still do a lot and learn a lot there. Everything still stems from the Bay Area. And so I started applying to companies whose products I use. And so I was filing my taxes and getting a lot of notifications from Mint. And so Intuit, who makes TurboTax, and Mint was a company I just cold applied to. Straight off the website, got the interview, flew out to the Bay, and I was sold. They gave me the job offer. I moved there right after graduation.
What were you doing?
I was a product manager. So I was a product manager for a mobile app called Snap Payroll. And then I was a part of a rotational program that was very much around like leadership development and kind of a fast track to leadership at the company. So I rotated throughout the business. My last rotation was at Demand Force, which was a company that Intuit had recently acquired, and they were just integrating it. So it was a really key moment for me to watch the integration of a startup culture, because I'd only known corporate tech culture, which is, it's great, but it's slower. It's very people who've been at the company for 10, 20, 15 years, it's very much not my normal speed. Then I went to this Demand Force company. They've got dogs, they've got ping pong, they've got beer pong, they've got everything. And it was the dream of what you think Silicon Valley is, good and bad, right? And again, for me, I was in learning mode. So I was like, I'm going to learn as much as possible. But there was a disconnect in my personal life where I felt lonely. I felt that I had to hide a certain part of who I was at work. Mike Brown had just happened and I was in San Francisco, but being from St. Louis, seeing the difference between the energy in San Francisco and the topics of conversation and what I was feeling and seeing in my home city and in my Facebook groups or my email list, it was just a pure I felt like I was in an alternate universe, and I did not want to stay in that industry. I wanted to be around and work on projects and solve problems that I felt passionately about. And that was problems for people I could resonate with, the Black community.
And so kind of before you get to this point, you mentioned kind of being in learning mode, and I'm just curious, like how much, right when you graduate, how much were you future planning and like kind of trying to lay out like this is what my career trajectory is going to look like, and how much was like I'm just going to take the best job that I can possibly take right now and just do my best at it, and then I'll figure it out? Because I feel like oftentimes you can do that, and it's easy to get stuck in a career that perhaps you never even wanted to be in, because of just the risks of like changing careers or even leaving and doing something else. So how much of that was planned out and how much of it was just, we'll take it day by day?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think especially in college, everybody kind of forces you or asks you a bunch of questions like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I didn't really I just wanted a job that looked cool and that I felt like I could learn a lot from. To me, it was about the skills and being surrounded by intelligent, smart people who are going to pour into me. I was willing to even work for less to have an experience which I could learn because I knew that this was going to be a key moment in my life that sets up to my trajectory. So, for anyone who's considering right now, what is that first job out of college? If you could work place X that's going to pay you 10K more, place Y where you're going to learn 10X more, you pick the other company. Okay. Like the money, you'll make it back later because your skills and your knowledge base is going to be worth so much more. And the second thing was being in a location that I could absorb. So similarly, being in the Bay Area, as long as I could get out there and get into the space, it's hard to predict. You don't know what you don't know, right? But I did know that Silicon Valley and the Bay Area is where I needed to be if I wanted to move quickly and build and be the best version of myself as an intellectual business person or a technologist or an innovator. Whichever route I went, there's kind of no wrong option in Silicon Valley when you're living there.
Right. And Morgan, just so our listeners know a little bit about, you and just kind of can relate better to you, you've only been out of college for like 8-9 years, right? Yes. So you're not like this like 45, 55, 65-year-old professional out there making things happen.
That's right.
You're like a lot of our listeners who are, in their early 20s to mid 30s, late 30s, right? We're still in that grind mode, that hustle mode, like trying to figure out like what we want to do with our life mode, right?
That's right.
And you didn't stay at Intuit for that long. I mean, you were there for about a year.
2-3 years.
And then you just go out and launch your own business, right? I mean, what happened that you realized, okay, like I can't do this corporate thing anymore that I really wanted to do my whole life because I really wanted to make money, but I want to go out and do something else on my own.
Yeah.
What happened?
So I was 24 when I started the company officially. I'm 31 now, so I've been in business for 6-ish years. And so, yeah, I was 22 when I started into it. I'd say around 23, I started to be like, this can't be it. I got to get going. What are we doing? Part of it was my ego. I mean, I was watching people who were already at Intuit, who are 2-3 years older than me, leave the company and go raise $2-3 million off of an idea. I'm sitting in Ubers and Lyfts, which again, at the time were like the new thing. I was sitting in Ubers and Lyfts and, the Uber driver was like, what startup do you work for? And I was like, damn, I don't work at a startup, so I was just in a moment in time in which it was like, how could you not? How can you not give it a go? And if you're going to try, it should be now when you don't have kids, you're not married. I didn't have school debt, which I was very privileged to not have that. And I was saving a lot of money and still living like a college student and was able to really be able to save as much cash as possible so that I could quit and still live in San Francisco, which is very expensive.
Yeah. So you mentioned like, you left. Well, it's kind of like, there's a couple different ways, I guess, folks start businesses. Like sometimes they just start a business just to start a business and hopefully it ends up working out. But many times that probably doesn't work out versus, like a serious pain or opportunity or something that you see, but there's so many angles you can look at it. Like, does the business model make sense? Sometimes it doesn't from the get-go. And then, like you said, it kind of works itself out. In your case, like, did you see like a specific problem or issue that you knew, like, I'm going to go after this all in? Or was it, I just want to start a business because it seems like everyone around me is doing it and be able to raise money and I'll figure it out as I go. But I don't really necessarily have like this like perfect idea or anything that I am super passionate about. Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, it was both. I think it came in phases and waves. So I started the I'm going to launch a business mindset, or I'm going to try my hand at startup mindset, I would say in 2013. And that was definitely based off of ego and boredom, and I have time on my hands, and why would I not? And then the real question is, well, when did I decide that I'm going to risk it all and actually quit? There's a difference between just deciding you're doing something and then taking action. And that was a couple things. That was Mike Brown, because I was upset, disappointed, sad. I felt helpless and powerless. And I felt like I had a skill set. I had a knowledge base because I was exposed to Silicon Valley, and not many Black people at the time of my generation have been exposed to Silicon Valley, where I felt inspired to build something that made a difference. I felt inspired to build a platform and a brand that could be of service using technology. And then the last thing that happened is that I did an analysis of the market itself. And the market was very antiquated for the problem I was trying to solve. In other words, Black media, legacy Black media, did not move to digital, did not move to mobile first, and was not even prioritizing the millennial generation. They were holding on to their average, reader's age, which was like 40. So I had also a blue ocean to play with. And I knew that nobody was going to try to go after the Black consumer, because I knew no one in Silicon Valley cared about Black people. So I would kind of had a lot of different things going for me: a market that's huge, a market I care about, a problem that I feel like I can solve, an antiquated market. There's a roadmap for it, because media isn't like a black box. I mean, there's so many millennial media companies launching at the time, just no one was doing it for this demo.
So Morgan, I mean, obviously the idea that you had really, came from this tragedy with Michael Brown and what happened in Ferguson. But for that moment in time, do you think you would have launched Blavity eventually?
No. No way.
Like it had to take that for you to like even realize that there was an opportunity here?
It had to take that for me to be so sad and so angry and so disappointed in how it was covered, and to have the unique St. Louis perspective of a native watching how the news covered it, and watching how even Black media didn't have the resources or the technology to empower those on the ground and to distribute information in the way that the activists needed us to distribute information at that time. There's no way I would have taken this much risk without feeling this way.
So Morgan, what was Blavity like early on? Like, when you first launched it in 2014, after you had left and finally quit, what did the early days of this company look like? I mean, what sort of media company was it?
Mm-hmm. So when I quit, I had started the business. We launched the first version of Blavity in July 2014. And it was a video website, and we were curating videos. We weren't an editorial site yet. We were very much like a Black Upworthy meets like Sophista Ratchet videos. It was very trendy. That was July 2014. Mike Brown happened in August 2014. So very quickly, the video website that we were building was like, skirt. We need to cover news. We need to hire writers. We need to be a place where people can use us to be of service. And we need to be a voice for creators. I also strongly believed that it wasn't just about activists. It was also about the voices, the creatives, the people of kind of the young Black demographic who are on the ground physically and virtually, who are the voice for our Black millennial age.
Was it basically like taking what, for example, what BET had done back then with entertainment, and using that platform, but more so for news and other sorts of content as opposed to just entertainment, right?
Right, where you could go to BET at one point and it would break artists. Artists that you wouldn't be able to find on MTV or wherever.
Right.
Same thing. Like, we were breaking news, we were breaking creators. You look back at our old content, you're going to see Quinta B, you're going to see Levy, you're going to see people who now are incredible stars. But at the time were, local, regional Black millennial stars. And we were that first place to publish. And so we decided to build a platform for the people, by the people, very FUBU,
Right.
and then scale through ground up. And then I started acquiring brands. Fast forward 2 years, 3 years after that, I then acquired a travel brand called Travel Noir that had done the same thing in the Black travel space. I acquired Shadow and Act, which was doing the same thing in the Black Hollywood entertainment space. And Afrotech is a business we created which focuses on Blacks in tech and VC. Same thing. It's the same ethos, different verticals.
Mm-hmm. So how do you get the ball rolling? Like, I know you mentioned you start with curating, and then I'm assuming at some point you start creating your own content.
Yes.
How, and obviously, like, there's the monetization piece as well to be able to make the money to then go out and acquire these brands and all that good stuff. So how does all that come together? And how does like the word spread initially?
Well, the word spread pretty quickly. We went from I would say like December 2014 to spring 2015. I mean, we were already at like 1 million monthly unique visitors because we were serving such a strong audience, both the creative audience and the kind of racial equity, social justice audience. And no one was covering that stuff. So everybody was sharing, and it created this viral coefficient. And in terms of the business side of it, I bootstrapped it for the first year and a half, and I didn't want to raise funding because I was very concerned with a venture capital fund or a group of people coming in and telling us who we were or who we were going to be too early before we had decided what kind of company we were going to be and what problems we were going to solve. And ultimately I had to raise because we kept getting hacked. At the time we were built on WordPress, and we kept getting hacked by, now we know it, the Russians. It's ironic. Because I was like, I think these are Russian bots or something. And it was getting really expensive. It was the servers, they were driving up our server costs. And I couldn't afford to both pay people and run the business. It was just too expensive.
And was it just you, like, kind of at the helm, or did you have like a co-founder or multiple co-founders? Like, when you just first started it, was it just you, and then you kind of just like slowly started hiring more and more people?
So it was me as the founding person who quit their job and put the money down and paid for the business. My good friends from college, Jonathan, Jeff, and Aaron, all kept their full-time jobs and helped out with different roles as we were building until we could get to a place where they could afford to take a pay cut or whatever have you, depending on what their personal life was going on. So yes, I was full-time on the business for about probably like 2 years or a year and a half before one of the guys came on full-time. Jonathan first, and then I believe Jeff, and then Aaron. So yeah, it was a rough, mean and lean group of people. And then we had a fellowship program because we needed a lot of folks from around the country involved. So I ran fellowship programs and internship programs because I could pay some amount of money, but not, a full salary. So it was a crazy operation looking back.
So Morgan, I've seen the website and I really love it. I mean, I just love how clean it is. I love just the different sorts of content on there. But I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you about Quad Connect. And that was, how did you plan on monetizing Blavity? Because I know that Pat and I and several others have always discussed different content platforms, and how to monetize them is always an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're the LA Times, the New York Times, they're all struggling to figure out how to make money,
Yes.
right? So what was the idea early on, and then what has it become more so now?
Early on, we were going to monetize by advertising and through, I did believe in some sort of membership model, some sort of gated platform or community where we monetize a certain small slither of our total audience that we had grown on the media side of the business and charge a monthly fee. That's not what we've done, but that was the original plan. And what we do now, and I'm proud that we are profitable and we've been able to build a model that so many people have failed at in a media company. And it's because we have two big businesses that are separate but live and coexist in an ecosystem. So one is Afrotech, which is, it's a leading tech conference. And so we have our main KPIs there is diversity, recruiting, hiring, and network building for Black professionals. So we have a job board, we have an annual conference, we have now at this point bi-weekly summits that are digital and in collaboration with our partners and sponsors. And so it's a well-oiled machine that has incredible impact. In the early days of Blavity, we used that profit to reinvest in the media side of the business as we scaled our total reach on the media side of the business and built our ad network. So our ad network not only serves our owned and operated properties, it also serves a network of other multicultural publishers, which allows us to scale more efficiently. And now that we're much larger, everything kind of evens out and winds up being an incredible business.
Right. And how do you get folks, perhaps more so now, who are not Black or African American to read articles or consume content that's on Blavity? Because I remember as a kid, we used to watch like BET music videos all the time, right? Or you used to go on there and just there was so much great content. Now, I can't say now that BET or VH1 or MTV are doing great. I don't think they are. But we as non-Blacks would go and watch this content. Why or what would somebody who's not Black get out of, reading content or consuming content on Blavity?
Yeah, I think about 40%, depending on the brand, of our audience is not Black. So it actually is expected because Black culture is relevant in so many industries in every parts of our lives, from the food we eat to the music we listen to the sports and athletes we cheer on, to the businesses that we support. I just saw that Savage Fenty is a $1 billion company. It's like, so Black culture is everywhere, and our content is about Black culture. Certainly there's some news pieces that I don't think anybody wants to read but us. But when you're thinking about or looking at you're traveling to Jamaica and you want to know what restaurants to eat at, Travel Noir is going to be the best place to tell you that. Do you want to trust Travel Noir? Or you want to trust World and Leisure? Like, you want to trust the people who know what they're talking about, right? So I think that Black culture is global, and we've been able to stay true and super serve our demographic while still having a portion of our content and our stories be accessible to a wider range of people as well.
And speaking of the content, is it a combination of like crowdsourced or curated content from other places on the internet, and also original content that you produce in-house, or is it fully original now, or is it fully crowdsourced? Like, how is the model?
It's absolutely user generated and curated, and owned and operated, created in-house with our editorial team, depending on the brand. So Blavity News, we have, if you go to the website now, you can write a story. It goes to our op-ed editors. They'll edit it. They'll send you notes. It can get released. It's a great opportunity for people who have a pulse on a specific part of the culture that maybe they don't want to write all the time, but they have something to say because something has happened. And we can be a great place to do that. That's in alignment with why we started the company and our core mission. Similarly, though, if we're talking about something like Travel Noir, if you just travel to Jamaica and you know all the hot spots, if you want to write that up or you want to send us a bunch of photos, we will accommodate that as well and make sure that we share your content out with a wider audience. And for many influencers now, we wind up being the first place of publish. So for people who are trying to grow their following, who want people to consider them as a domain expert or a thought leader, we're a great place to get started.
So I have a more broad question for you that is something that I've been thinking about a lot since everything that happened, obviously, in 2020, with the Black Lives Matter movement and just everything that came as before that, after that. And so I try to be as responsive as possible in my life by studying like the core problems that there are. And obviously there's so many core problems, but there was one story that I had heard about this, like, I'll quickly tell the story, but apparently there was like this appraisal, in Florida, and husband and wife were trying to sell their home, Black family. And the wife goes away to, let's say, Target, whatever. I don't know where she went. And the appraiser comes, white guy, appraises the house, $330,000, right? Just a random number. she's like, that's kind of weird because everything else has been selling for 440, 450 in the neighborhood. And she's an attorney. I mean, she's like making decent money. She's not like a, like unemployed woman with like a husband who's also like, she's making money. She's a professional woman. So she said, you know what? I'm going to get a better idea here. So they asked for a black appraiser to come. Sorry, excuse me. Another appraiser comes, but this time they pull down all the pictures in their home, right? So to make sure that nobody can assume that they're black or anything of that nature. And it gets appraised for like $100,000 more than what it was. And so I thought to myself, one of the biggest problems here is the economic justice, and the fact that, or the injustice, I should call it, the economic injustice. How do you think that a company like Blavity or even somebody like yourself contributes in a positive manner to the economic justice movement for Black folks, as opposed to just the social justice movement, right? Which I still believe is very necessary and very important. But I also think that a lot of it stems from the economic injustice that occurs and the wide wealth gap that there is between Black Americans and everybody else.
It's a great question. And that story resonated, I think, with so many people who were like, this is just so obviously messed up, right? I agree with you that economic empowerment, economic freedom, economic advancement, and the wealth gap is arguably, in my personal opinion, the number one issue.
Right.
And I think it's partially the number one issue that I focus on because I feel like it's more in our control. I don't feel like I can make an impact as much on the political system and our laws because it's just so dependent on so many other people like doing the right thing. And whereas economic freedom and economic justice, if you can, as an entrepreneur, create value and create wealth and create jobs and be an owner, then you get the power. You have more likelihood of being able to even influence politics. And so, for me, Afrotech, Blavity Inc., all of our brands and our company, even our company mission is partially around economic advancement, which could mean, particularly for Afrotech, is where we mostly focus on it on a day-to-day, is let's get people jobs in tech where they're getting equity. I have friends who got jobs, who came to Afrotech, weren't planning on moving to the Bay, didn't want to work at Facebook or Twitter and leave, and live out there with these people. No, they weren't interested in it. But when they got that equity package and they got the stock and they did the math on how much their options were worth, it changes the entire trajectory of their entire family wealth structure to have those moments of being able to liquidate shares. Or when a company IPOs, I have friends who worked at Airbnb, and that IPO, they were able to buy a house. So I firmly believe that it's not even just about entrepreneurship. It's also about access to better jobs and access to higher paying industries like the tech industry. And of course, as an entrepreneur myself, I take the responsibility of trying to share my information and give access to the things that I've learned along the way. I didn't have entrepreneurs that I could really talk to when I first started, nor do I come from a family that, of entrepreneurs. And so I've learned a lot of things along the way, and I've made it part of my personal mission to help and advise a lot of young Black founders and Black small business owners, even because it's really hard and it's lonely to do alone.
Not to mention, like, all that stuff, but also like just serving as a role model and showing people like, hey, look what's possible if you just like put yourself out there and pursue whatever crazy dream or vision that you have. Because there's a lot of people that'll help you and back you up, right? And so for you, I guess maybe start at a young age, or maybe it's now, but like who do you look up to the most? Like who are, like, they don't have to be even entrepreneurs, but people that you've just like always admired and kind of followed their path or career, whatever they're doing, and it's inspired you to do great things as well.
The people that I've looked up to that have really influenced and changed my behavior are absolutely entrepreneurs, and they're pure entrepreneurs. Deshaun Amira at Maven, he was one of the first entrepreneurs to call me out when I still had my day job and was like, do not talk to me about this company one more time until you quit. My friend Dave Salvant at Squire, he oftentimes advises me to be more aggressive with my terms when I'm negotiating with VCs. My girlfriend, Melissa Butler at the Lip Bar, she taught me a lot about consumer business, and her products are distributed in Target and Walmart as a beauty company. So, I look and try to learn and absorb from the people around me that are doing incredible things. And I think that more young founders, young entrepreneurs, instead of trying to get that random meeting with that random VC who's not really going to care about you, spend more time networking and building relationships and being honest and authentic and vulnerable with your peers, because they too have experience and can share their advice and their feedback with you.
Right. Morgan, you're obviously such a young person who has basically just started, right, in her journey. Where do you see yourself in the next few years? I mean, do you see Blavity just continuing to grow and you running that, or do you see yourself venturing out to perhaps, launch a venture capital fund and fund the next wave of Black entrepreneurs? I mean, what is your vision?
I go back and forth on this. I feel very committed and responsible for making sure that Blavity continues to grow in a sustainable, profitable way, that we can continue to be an institution for Black media and for our voice of this generation. It's just, we're not done yet. We have a lot of other verticals to tackle. We just started podcasting. We got to figure out video and OTT and streaming. I mean, we have a lot more to do. So that's going to take me some time, and I'm committed to that. Now, in terms of my personal role, I made the transition from a founder to a CEO, which was not easy. I mean, there very much is a difference between someone who has a founder mindset and then someone who's able to operate as a CEO of a big business and scale that business to 50 million revenue, 100 million revenue. That's a very oftentimes different person. And so I asked myself, am I the right person for that? Right now, I think I'm still at the top of my game, but there may be others who are more qualified than me that can lead this business better on the day-to-day on the operations side. So that may look like different things, but it is something I ask myself often. My personal mission outside of Blavity is absolutely entrepreneurship and being of service to small business owners. I started a podcast, the Work Smart Advisor podcast, so I could just share more and scale up my information giving to other people. I angel invest, and certainly I love giving away money. I would prefer to give away other people's money though. So there may be a fund at some point that I join. Not sure that I really want to raise a fund, but I'd be happy to be a part of someone else's fund and give money away. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens next.
Morgan, there was a couple of things I asked you early on, and then I want to kind of tie together now, which was, the audience that Blavity serves, and then economic justice versus, social justice. And not that necessarily they have to live apart, but just for this scenario. Don't you think that a message of Black entrepreneurship and, encouraging others who are not Black to hire other folks who are Black and give them more opportunities, mentor them more, really put an effort on giving them the space and the environment to be able to be exposed and grow, is a lot better and stronger of a message than purely, right, Black Lives Matter, for example. And I'm not saying that message doesn't matter, but we've spoken to the founder of Black Lives Matter, and after that podcast was over, I felt a little like, I don't know if this is enough. I don't know if this is a strong enough message to really convince people who are not Black that the Black lives do matter. But I do feel like after reading that economic justice story of that appraisal in the home, I was like, that's a damn good story. Like, that's a story that everyone can listen to and say, you know what? That's fucked up, right? Like, we got to do something about it. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because I'm not a Black person. I can't sit here and be like, I know everything. But based on my perception, that's my viewpoint.
Yeah. I think that it's a viewpoint that many probably share. And I think my point of view is that it's not an either or. I think that we all have to do what is in our sphere of control and do what we can, because it's going to require more than just having successful Black businesses. We've had successful Black businesses and they burned them down. Tulsa, right? So, that's not enough. If you can burn me down and not go to jail, then I need the criminal justice reform. So I need both Patrice, I need Amanda Seales, I need D-Ray, I need Barack Obama, I need Diddy, I need Jay-Z, I need everybody to care, and I need all white people to care, because it will move much faster if we're not doing this alone. And I don't think we have a lot of time to wait. We've waited long enough. So whatever story, whatever inequity, whatever thing pulls your heartstrings, great. Like if it's someone getting shot and killed or someone being strangled to death, fine. If it is the social economic disparity, if it's the digital divide that all these kids right now are having school at home, well, that assumes they have a freaking Wi-Fi and they have devices and that they're not sharing one device with 4 kids in a household. Yep. I mean, there's so many issues. So, I could go on, but I think for me and for any non-Black person listening to this, just find whatever the thing is that makes you care, because there's an infinite list of problems and opportunities for change.
And with all this said, you mentioned, doing angel investing on the side and just kind of, being involved in that community. What are you most looking forward to or excited for in the next, 5 to 10 years, just in general? Like what kind of areas or industries, or what are you looking at?
So when I angel invest, I've angel invested in 3 companies. One's called Public, which is a Robinhood alternative. And it's an app where you can invest in stocks. And as someone who invested in stocks at a really early age, at age of 13, I know the value of compounding your returns on your stocks and how much money that can give you. And I want more people, especially people of color. One of the reasons I signed on to be an angel investor is because I wanted to be of service to making sure that the audience and the customer base was diverse and being a mouthpiece for this app. So that's something that I think is important, is apps and platforms that democratize technology and give people more access to information, and little guys being able to play in the big boys games. And I think that's, Robinhood started off that way. I think Public is a better option. And, Bitcoin, Coinbase. I mean, there's a lot of people in fintech that are working on products in that vertical. The second part is consumer goods. So diversifying consumer goods that enable people to partake in health and wellness. So I think health and wellness is a huge opportunity for our generation and Gen Z, because we've never had more cash and freedom to think about the ingredients we're putting in our food, in our mouth, and our hair, and our skin, and all these things. So I think there's a huge business and trend there. And then the last one is B2B. I mean, running a business, I have seen all the tools in the world, and yet they're still not good enough. And I feel like we were just talking about Zencastr versus, Zoom. It's like there's just so many tools. And as more people become entrepreneurs, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the B2B kind of SaaS product area.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Morgan, I also saw that you were just an advisor to so many of these companies, whether it's American Airlines or Pepsi. I mean, that's pretty impressive, first of all. But how did that happen, and what sort of value have you been able to bring to them? And what have you learned from those companies that you could then apply to yours, and hopefully grow even more?
Yeah, so I am an advisor to American Airlines, PepsiCo, Quaker Oats as a part of PepsiCo as well, and a variety of other organizations. And those big companies that I work with, typically it's around racial equity and inclusion and advising their longer term strategies in the multicultural space. So oftentimes their clients who are multi-year commitments to Blavity, and they are thinking about how to do things better. And they know that the diversity in their leadership team may omit some opinions and some points of view around the table. And so they're bringing me and others in to provide that real, honest point of view based off of the data and our experience. What I've learned in those rooms, there's a few things. One is they're really as clueless as you think. There is really a huge opportunity gap. I mean, I'm probably going to get dinged by someone on a PR team later for this, but I'm like, wait, really? This is it? This is what we're doing? You're literally one of the biggest companies in the world, and that terrifies me. So Yeah, I think that we do have a problem at the corporate level, at the C level, and the board level at these companies to truly have diversity at the top. And I'm not just talking about like Black women on boards. I'm talking about just true diversity in all of its senses. I mean, it cannot just be white men running these companies.
Right.
We need women. We need all of the different demographics because they're building products for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a great example of that was something I read recently with, there was this guy who worked at, I want to call it Frito-Lay, and he was like the maintenance guy. Remember the story?
Yeah.
And I think they put out, he was Mexican, and he would just clean the floors. And this is like 20, 25 years ago. And then, he realized that there was like a product missing, and he would eat his like, chips with like hot sauce or whatever, and just kind of like, make it more like Latin, like a Latin flavor. So he basically, the CEO says, whoever has like a new product for us, present it to us. So this guy goes in one day and he presents him what later has become like hot Cheetos, right?
My
this
favorite
guy,
product.
There you go. This guy literally, was this Mexican maintenance guy within the warehouse. And, he just liked his Cheetos, the way that his people would eat food. And then they made hot Cheetos. And I mean, now, I think he's now like a, motivational speaker or whatever. He's done very well for himself. But I mean,
that's the point. It's better for business.
Right. 100%. And out of just, I think from diversity stems so many better ideas. Like even if you're just in a group of friends, right? And you have 5 friends and you guys are all 5 different cultures or different backgrounds, whatever the case may be. The ideas that you could come up with, whether business or life, are just so much better because everybody's bringing a different perspective, right? And I think that, like for me, I don't like to be surrounded with people that are going to always tell me yes, right? I already think I'm right all the time, right? That's kind of the point. But I want other people to be like, no, that's actually not right. We should probably try this out this way, right? Just the different perspectives that people bring to stuff can really help innovate businesses, right? The reason why those products that you're talking about, B2B, are probably bad is because the white men are making it for other white men, and it's good for them. Right,
and even
but they don't know
in the room, and I think that's the key too. Is somehow diversity has become this cringy word to some group of people, where they're like, "Oh, diversity, let's not talk about it." Right. "Oh, diversity, you just mean like let's just give away all the tables and seats to all these other people." Okay, look, I get it. There's a fixed number of seats at the table, so in order to increase diversity, you're going to have to take away a seat from someone who already has one, which is most likely a white man. So I understand as a white man why this might be uncomfortable, because you're going to have to give away some.
Or just get a bigger table. I don't know why you can't get a bigger table.
A bigger table, but the mindset is that you're
pretty simple.
Right.
I mean, yes, you're taking the numbers away from the denominator, but like it doesn't matter, right? Like if you want to keep your 10 white men, keep them. Just add 7 other women in there.
That's right.
Like it's.
So maybe that's what we should do. I mean, I think the NASDAQ CEO is woman now, and she's like about to mandate some diversity benchmarks for corporations.
I love it. Well, Morgan, we can probably sit down and chat with you about a ton of stuff now, but it's just so inspiring to see somebody who's in our kind of age group and the age group of our listeners who's still in that grind mode talking. I hope that people that listen to this are inspired by the fact that you literally graduated, worked for a couple of years, and then just started your own thing, right? Like it didn't take you many years to take action and just become an entrepreneur. And sometimes you have to take that risk or that leap of faith to create what you want in life, or else you're just going to be stuck at a place where they're not going to give you what your life is supposed to be or what your passions and purposes are. So thank you for sharing your story, and I'm hoping one day we can do this in person since this pandemic sucks. But thank you for your the motivation and inspiration that you've given both of us, I'm sure, and for everybody else listening to get up and do something about something.
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.
Thank you, Morgan.